Part 1. Jacob's ladder was not a ladder. There is a word in this passage that has been mistranslated for so long that most readers never question it. The English Bibles say ladder, and the image that comes to mind is something wooden, narrow, perhaps leaning against the sky like a farm ladder propped against a barn. That image has shaped sermons and songs and children's coloring pages for centuries, and it is almost certainly wrong. The Hebrew word is salam, and it appears only once in the entire Old Testament, right here in Genesis 28. There is no parallel. The translators had no precedent. They made a choice, and that choice has quietly guided how this entire scene is understood. But what if the choice was not the best one? What if the object Jacob saw was not a ladder at all, but something far older and far more massive? What a salam actually is, in the ancient Near Eastern world, is a stone staircase, the kind of ramped stairway that led to the top of a ziggurat. Ziggurats were temple towers, built as artificial mountains, with broad staircases climbing the sides so that priests could ascend to the shrine at the summit. These stairs were not portable, they were permanent architecture, wide enough for processions, made of mud brick or stone. Picture the scale: a ziggurat could rise over 100 feet. Its staircase a series of broad steps, each one as wide as a modern street, climbing in tiers. The priests would ascend slowly, the dust of the desert rising with their feet, the weight of the stairway pressing down through the ages. When Jacob sees a salam set up on the earth with its top reaching to heaven, the first hearers of this story, people familiar with Mesopotamian culture, people who had seen the ziggurats of Ur or Babylon, would not have pictured a rustic ladder. They would have pictured that staircase. And that changes everything. Think about what a ziggurat staircase was for. It was a human construction, an attempt to bridge the gap between earth and heaven. The pagans of Ur and Babylon built these towers so that their gods could descend and so that their priests could ascend. The staircase was a religious technology, a means of contact, a declaration that people could reach up and touch the divine through their own effort. And here Jacob sees one in a dream, except this one is not built by human hands. It is set up on the earth, placed there by an act of God. The angels are not climbing up to deliver messages to heaven, they are descending and ascending. But the text says ascending and descending in that order, a peculiar inversion that emphasizes the movement that starts from heaven. The first direction is upward. The angels are coming from God and returning to God. The staircase is not a ladder of ascent for Jacob to climb, it is a corridor of divine movement, a declaration that God is the one who initiates contact. The pagans built their stairs to reach up, God builds his stairs to reach down. Now the problem with the traditional reading becomes clear. When we imagine a ladder, we imagine something precarious, something that requires effort to climb. The preacher's sermon says Jacob's ladder represents your journey upward toward God. You must climb one rung at a time through prayer and good works. That is not in the text. Jacob is asleep. He does not climb anything. He does not move. The entire action belongs to God and to the angels. The salam is not Jacob's ladder at all, it is God's ramp, built from heaven down to a fugitive sleeping on a rock. The theological weight shifts entirely. This passage is not about human aspiration, it is about divine condescension. Every sermon you have ever heard about climbing the ladder is a sermon about a ladder that is not in the Bible. There is a cultural detail worth sitting with here. In the ancient world, ziggurats were often called the house of the god, the dwelling place of the deity. The name Bethel appears later in Canaanite texts as the name of a temple, a place where the god was thought to reside permanently. When Jacob wakes from this dream, he says, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." And then he names the place Bethel, Bethel, literally house of God. The echo is deliberate. The pagans called their temples the house of God, but they built them. Jacob calls a bare patch of ground with a rock for a pillow the house of God, and he builds nothing. God has already come down. The house is wherever God chooses to descend. That is the first shock of the passage. The sacred is not manufactured, it is received. The place is not holy because of the site itself, it is holy because God showed up there, uninvited, on a fugitive's itinerary. And here is where the text presses hard on the modern reader. Most of us live as if the opposite were true. We spend enormous energy trying to manufacture spiritual experience, finding the right church, the right worship style, the right retreat center, the right posture in prayer. We treat the Christian life as a climb, a ladder of disciplines that will lift us closer to God. We exhaust ourselves on the rungs, measuring our progress by how high we have ascended, how many prayers we have prayed, how much we have sacrificed. But the Psalm says something else. It says that God is already at the bottom of the staircase, not at the top. The angels are coming down. The movement is from heaven to earth, not earth to heaven, which means the person who feels farthest from God, the one who has stopped climbing, who has given up on the effort, who is lying on a rock in the middle of a spiritual wasteland, may be exactly where God intends to meet him. The exhaustion is not a failure, it may be the prerequisite. Jacob is at the lowest point of his life in this chapter. He is a fugitive, cheating his brother of the blessing and fleeing for his life. He has no home, no status, no future that he can see. The rock under his head is a symbol of his condition: hard, cold, uncomfortable. He is not praying for a vision. He is not fasting or seeking a sign. He is simply exhausted, and he falls asleep. And that is when the Psalm appears. The text does not say that Jacob deserved the dream. It does not say that he was righteous or that he had been faithful. It says he left Beersheba, went to a certain place, and stayed the night because the sun had set. That is the only preparation. The dream comes as pure gift, unearned, unanticipated. There is no ladder of merit. There is only the grace of a God who descends to the rock. But here we run into a tension that the text does not immediately resolve, because Jacob's response to the dream is not worship or joy. It is fear. He says, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." The word awesome carries weight, the same root used for the fear of the Lord, the same word that describes the terror of standing before a consuming fire. Jacob is terrified. He has just seen the staircase that connects heaven and earth, and instead of comfort, he feels dread. Why? What is there in the vision that produces fear rather than reassurance? The text does not answer immediately. It lets us sit with the question. Jacob has received an unconditional promised land, offspring, blessing, protection. And yet when he wakes, he does not rejoice. He trembles. Something in the vision has unsettled him at a level deeper than the promise itself. Consider Jacob's personal history. He is the son who tricked his father, who stole the blessing that belonged to Esau, who is now running from the consequences of his own cunning. He knows what it means to take something that was not meant for him. And now, in the dream, God has given him a blessing not stolen but freely offered. That is precisely the problem. Jacob has only ever received things by grasping. He has never received anything as a gift. The promise terrifies him because he does not know what to do with a gift he cannot manipulate. The staircase is not a tool. He can use it as a presence he cannot control. The gate of heaven is open, but he has no idea how to walk through it without his old strategies. The answer to the fear is hidden in the word Psalm itself. Because a ziggurat staircase was not a comfortable sight for a Hebrew. The ziggurats were the symbols of Babylon, the city of human pride, the Tower of Babel where men tried to build a tower to heaven, and God came down to scatter them. Jacob sees the same structure in his dream, except now it is not built by human ambition, it is built by God's grace. But the memory of Babel hangs in the air. Jacob knows that the wrong kind of staircase invites judgment. And here he is, a man who has just lied and stolen, now standing in the presence of the God who judges such things. The fear is not irrational. It is the fear of a guilty man who suddenly sees that the distance between heaven and earth has been bridged, and he has no idea what that means for him. The staircase is not a guarantee, it is an exposure. The text does not answer this fear immediately. It lets us sit in it. After the dream, Jacob makes a vow, but his vow sounds more like a bargain than faith. He says, "If God will be with me and keep me, then the Lord shall be my God." There is a condition in the vow, a hedge. Jacob is still calculating. He has seen the Psalm, but he has not yet understood that the staircase does not depend on his performance. He is still trying to make a deal with the God who just gave him an unconditional promise. That tension is the engine that drives the rest of Genesis. And it is where we must stop for now, because the question the passage leaves us with is unresolved. What does it mean to receive a promise that you did not earn and cannot control? Jacob will need the rest of his life to find out. Part 2. Bethel was not a holy place. The vow hangs in the air like smoke from a fire that has not fully caught. Jacob says, "If God will be with me and keep me, then the Lord shall be my God." The condition is the problem. He has just seen the staircase, heard the promise, received the blessing directly from the mouth of God, and his first instinct is still to bargain. But watch closely what he actually says, because the Hebrew here is doing something the English misses. Jacob does not say "if God will be with me" as a pure condition. He uses the word "im," which can mean if, but also when or since in certain constructions. The ambiguity is deliberate. Jacob is not fully doubting the promise, he is groping toward trust the only way he knows how. He has spent his entire life grasping, scheming, trading, so when God gives him a gift, his reflex is to turn it into a transaction. He does not know how to receive without first agreeing to pay. The word for vow here is neder, and in the ancient world a vow was serious business. You made a vow to a god when you wanted something, or when you had received something, and needed to seal the relationship. But a neder often carried a conditional structure: "If you do this for me, then I will do that for you." Jacob's vow sounds exactly like that, a pagan bargain, a contract with the divine. And yet the text does not condemn him for it. It simply records it. Why? Because the vow is Jacob's first step toward faith, however clumsy. He is not rejecting the promise, he is trying to respond to it with the only language he has. The problem is that the God of the staircase does not negotiate. The promise was unconditional. Jacob's vow is a human attempt to make sense of a grace that does not fit inside his ledger. This is the moment where the text presses hardest on the person watching. Every one of us has made a bargain with God. We have said, "If you get me through this, I will serve you. If you heal my child, I will never doubt again. If you give me this job, I will tithe faithfully." The words come out of our mouths before we can stop them, and they sound reasonable. Except they reveal something uncomfortable. We still think the relationship is a transaction. We still believe that our performance earns God's favor. The Psalm says the opposite. The staircase came down while Jacob was asleep. He contributed nothing. The promise was spoken before he could offer anything in return. And yet here he is, trying to turn the gift into a deal. The grace of the text is that God does not reject the clumsy vow. God lets Jacob make his bargain, knowing that Jacob will eventually learn that bargains are unnecessary. Now the scene shifts from the dream to the morning. Jacob wakes, takes the stone he had used for a pillow and sets it up as a pillar. He pours oil on top of it. This is a ritual act, and it demands our attention because it looks exactly like what pagans did. Throughout the ancient Near East, people set up standing stones massiboth as markers of sacred sites, as dwelling places for deities, as witnesses to covenants. The Canaanites did it, the Babylonians did it, and here Jacob does it, without any instruction from God, without any precedent in his own family. Abraham built altars, he did not set up pillars. But Jacob does, and the text does not condemn him for it. It simply records that he poured oil on the stone. The physical gesture matters. The stone was the object under his head, the rock that had been his only comfort in a desolate place. He takes the commonest, hardest, most ordinary thing, a stone from the ground, and he consecrates it. He pours oil over it, anointing it, marking it as something set apart. The oil is the same substance used to anoint priests and kings, and Jacob pours it on a rock. That is audacious. He is treating the stone as if it were something sacred, as if the rock itself had become a vessel of the divine presence. But the text is careful. Jacob does not worship the stone. He sets it up as a matzebah, a standing stone, which in Hebrew can also mean a witness. The stone is a monument, not an idol. It is a way of saying something happened here that I cannot carry in my hands, so I will leave this rock to remember it. And then Jacob names the place Bethel. But the place did not have a name before. It was simply Hamakim, the place, a generic term for wherever the sun went down. The text says he called the name of that place Bethel, but in the same verse it says the name of the city was Luz at first. There is a dislocation here. The place already had a name, Luz, but Jacob gives it a new name, and that name sticks. Bethel will become one of the most important locations in Israelite history, a place where prophets and kings encounter God. But right now, in this moment, Bethel is not a holy site. It is not a pilgrimage destination. It is not a temple. It is a patch of ground where a fugitive slept on a rock and saw a staircase. Jacob does not build a sanctuary. He does not declare that God lives here permanently. He anoints a stone and moves on. Bethel becomes holy not because of the location, but because of what happened there. The Hebrew word Makam, place, appears throughout this chapter with a weight that is easy to miss. It is the same word used in Genesis 22, when Abraham sees the place where he will sacrifice Isaac. It is the same word used when God says, "The place where you stand is holy ground." Makam does not mean a geographical coordinate, it means a point of encounter, a location where heaven and earth intersect for a moment. Jacob stumbles into a Makam without knowing it. He does not plan to have a vision there. He does not choose the place for its spiritual significance. He stops because the sun went down. That is the only reason. And that is the point. The Makam is wherever God chooses to descend. It is not a place you find, it is a place you occupy when God shows up. Think about what this means for the person who watches this video. You have your own places where you have experienced the presence of God: a church, a retreat, a moment of silence, a hospital room, a car at a red light. And it is natural to want to return to those places, to treat them as sacred, to protect them from the ordinariness of life. But the text says, do not hold too tightly. Jacob left Bethel. He did not build a house there. He did not establish a priesthood there. He anointed a stone and he walked away. The sacred is not a location you can return to, it is a pattern of divine descent that follows you. God did not stay at Bethel. God went with Jacob into Haran, into Laban's household, into the wrestling match at Peniel, into the reconciliation with Esau. Bethel was not the destination. It was the beginning of a journey with a God who descends wherever Jacob goes. And yet the text does leave us with one more twist. Later in Jacob's life, after he has been cheated and blessed and wrestled and renamed, God tells him to return to Bethel. In Genesis 35, Jacob builds an altar there, and this time he does not set up a pillar. He builds an altar, the way his grandfather Abraham did. Something has changed. The first encounter at Bethel was pure gift, unearned, and Jacob responded with a conditional vow. The second encounter at Bethel comes after a lifetime of learning that God keeps promises even when people do not. Jacob no longer bargains. He builds an altar and he worships. The name Bethel has become true for him, not because of the rock or the oil, but because he has finally understood that the house of God is wherever God is trusted. That is the weight the passage carries into the present. You do not need to find the right place. You do not need to climb a ladder. You do not need to make a bargain. The staircase is already down. God is already at the bottom. The rock you are lying on right now, the hard ground of your exhaustion or your failure or your ordinary Tuesday, that ground is already holy. You did not make it holy. You did not discover it. God chose it. The only question is whether you will anoint the stone and leave it behind, trusting that the God who descended once will descend again, in another place, at another time, until the day when there is no longer any distance between heaven and earth, and the staircase becomes unnecessary because the one who came down is the one who stays.